Hi, my name's Thalassa, and at 17 my parents made sure the whole town knew I was, quote, the poor girl. They said it right in the crowd, loud enough for the judges to hear. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst was knowing they'd planned it, just like they'd erased my name from every document that should have been mine. But I had something they didn't expect, proof, and one final stage they couldn't steal from me. Now I wonder, if your family set you up to fail, would you still find a way to win? Before we begin, tell me, where are you listening from right now? Morning coffee? Late at night? Drop a comment below. I'd love to know who's hearing this story. The school auditorium hadn't changed much. The same cracked linoleum floors, the same scratched wooden chairs arranged in stiff rows, the same dusty smell of varnish and bad coffee that clung to the air after every PTA meeting. I used to help Mom set up chairs here when I was little, thinking one day I'd be on that stage doing something important. But now, at 31, I was still taping down extension cords and checking mic batteries, not because I wanted to be here, but because I'd said yes when no one else did. Cambria was already up there, standing center stage like she was born with a spotlight in her blood. My older sister could charm the paint off a wall. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, the kind of presence that made people laugh at things that weren't funny. She waved at Mom, who sat in the front row, then turned to the microphone and tapped it twice. "Mic check," she chirped. 1 2 1 2. Can y'all hear me? Good. Let's get this party started. She caught sight of me by the side curtain and smirked. "Mom said you're helping with the backstage setup. Love that for you?" I clenched my jaw but said nothing. It wasn't worth the oxygen. The PTA president, Mrs. Kersey, handed me a clipboard without a word. I was background again. I always had been. Then, from her seat near the front, Mom turned to the woman beside her and said, loud enough for everyone within 10 feet to hear, "She's just helping out. She's always been more practical than polished, bless her heart." The words hit like ice water. Nobody gasped. Nobody looked at me with pity. Just a few nods and small chuckles like it was all in good fun. I didn't flinch. I'd learned not to. My mouth stayed shut, my back straight. But inside me, something sharp twisted a little deeper. Later that afternoon, I found myself in the school gym, running over the list of scheduled performers. That's when Cambria cornered me. Lip gloss perfect, voice sticky sweet. "Hey sis, you're not seriously doing that gloomy violin piece again, are you?" she asked, her voice bouncing off the cinder block walls. "People come for fun, not to hear a funeral dirge." "I'm not here to perform," I said flatly. "Right, of course not. That's what Mom said. She figured you'd be better off doing a duet with that little 7th grader, Leah or Lana or whatever. You two are a better match. The solo's going to the mayor's niece now." "What? You weren't told?" Her eyes widened in mock surprise. "Oh, awkward." I marched straight to Mom, who was sorting brochures in the teacher's lounge like nothing had happened. "You gave away my piece." She barely looked up. "You're not a star, Thalassa. You're useful. Be useful." The air felt like it had been sucked from the room. I should have shouted. Should have said something that would leave a scar. But I just stood there, fists curled, breath shallow, because I knew it wouldn't matter. That evening, Cambria dropped by the house with a garment bag and a chirpy tone that made my teeth itch. "Your costume," she said, tossing it on the couch. "You'll look cute, like small-town sweet, authentic." I unzipped it slowly. A faded yellow dress stared back at me, something that looked like it had survived a moth invasion. The fabric was thin. One sleeve was longer than the other. It smelled like attic dust. I tried it on. It clung to my hips in the worst way and bunched at the collar like a wrinkled apology. I stood in front of the mirror, arms at my sides, heart thudding. They wanted me small, sweet, harmless. They wanted me to disappear behind the curtain. But I wasn't going to cry. Not for them. Not this time. I saved my crying for later, sitting in my car with the radio off and the dress still clinging to my skin. It was late, the sky turning that hazy blue that always reminded me of forgotten things, like notebooks under the bed, or bruises you didn't notice until you showered. I didn't go straight home. I drove aimlessly for a while, past empty gas stations and shuttered shops, until I ended up near the strip mall where Cambria's real estate face smiled down from a massive billboard. Her teeth practically glowed under the street lamp, the words, Cambria Crosswell Realty, top 1% nationwide, in bold print beside her. I remember helping her take that headshot. She didn't use the one I edited, of course. She said mine made her look too real. The next morning, I pulled into the school lot a little earlier than needed. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just didn't want to see anyone. My student, Elena, had texted that she'd be late for rehearsal, so I wandered into the auditorium by myself, violin case in hand, and sat near the stage while the janitor vacuumed behind the bleachers. That's when I heard them. Cambria's voice, bright as ever, echoing from the wings near the dressing area. I mean, the lass is sweet, bless her, but she's not stage material. Letting her play tonight is basically a charity act. Another voice responded, a deeper, more polished one. The guest judge, I realized. He let out a light, forced chuckle. No disagreement, just enough to let the insult land and linger. I stayed frozen in my seat, not out of shock, but out of knowing that this had always been how they spoke when they thought I couldn't hear. When I was 8 and they told me I had helper hands. When I was 16 and they gifted Cambria a brand new sedan for graduation while I saved up for a second-hand bike from a flea market. When I was 20 and Cambria got the family heirloom necklace and I got a pat on the back. They thought they were slick. That calling me practical was a compliment. That I didn't notice who got the spotlight and who got the folding chairs. I moved to the back row and sat there a while, violin across my lap like a sleeping pet. The auditorium smelled like wax and stress and stale coffee. And for a moment, I was 11 again, sitting in this very room while Cambria walked across the stage to accept her middle school Excellence in Presentation trophy. Mom clapped like she'd won the Nobel. I had gotten a certificate for good participation. It was already bent by the time we got home. I eventually made my way backstage to grab the show program. It was glossy this year, clearly Cambria's doing. Inside, her name appeared in bold. Cambria Crosswell, Event Co-Director. Mine, buried in size 9 font on the last page under Additional Logistics Support. I didn't get mad, not on the outside. I just folded the program quietly, slipped it into my tote bag, and left. That night, back in my room, I placed the violin case on my bed and stared at it. My student, Elena, had texted me again. Still okay to meet before lunch tomorrow? I didn't answer. Instead, I opened my laptop and started combing through old footage. Recitals, local fundraisers, that one time I got featured on the community channel for playing at the VA hospital. None of my family had watched any of it, not even once. I remembered setting up my phone on a chair at one of those gigs, pressing record, then looking into the empty audience where Mom had promised she'd be. She had to take Cambria to a nail appointment. "We'll make it up to you," she'd said. They never did. So I watched myself on that small screen. Awkward posture, yes, but steady hands, clear tone. A piece I had arranged myself. I watched and watched until the room faded, and I was just a pair of eyes soaking up a version of me they never cared to see. I had let them script my place for years. Let them hand me the logistics clipboard while they passed the mic to Cambria. But tonight, something inside me cracked just enough to let the truth in. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't weak. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't done yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was overwhelmed or upset, no, I was alert. Awake in a way I hadn't been in years. I cleaned my tiny kitchen twice, rearranged the mugs. I even rewound my old cassette player just to hear the satisfying click it made. Somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m., Elena texted that she wasn't feeling well. "I'm so sorry," she wrote. "I might have the flu. I don't want to get anyone sick." I stared at her message for a few minutes. Then, slowly, I looked over at my violin case resting near the TV stand. The house was quiet. I could hear the fridge humming behind me and the occasional rustle of wind against the window pane. That's when I opened my laptop. I typed out a short email to the school's backup event account. Just a generic subject line. Alt performance for 7BL if needed. No signature, no explanation. Attached was a private Dropbox link. It was a 6-minute video of me at 21, standing in a tiny college recital hall, pouring everything I had into a solo I wrote myself. My professor had called it haunting in the best way, but my mother never saw it. Cambria said she was too busy showing homes that day. I hovered over the send button for a long while. My hands didn't shake, but my stomach did that weird slow turn, like waiting for test results you already expect. And then I clicked it. By mid-morning Saturday, the parking lot was jammed. The show had turned into a mini-town event. Food trucks, face painting for kids, a local radio van. I pulled into a side spot and kept my sunglasses on, even though the clouds covered most of the sun. Cambria was already inside, greeting guests and handing out programs like a pageant queen. I saw Mom holding a bouquet of lilies, Cambria's favorite, and wearing one of those floppy straw hats that made her look like she belonged on a resort poster. No one noticed me as I slipped through the side entrance. I made my way behind the curtain where volunteers bustled around, headsets on and clipboards waving. I had one too. Mine was legitimate, but nobody asked what I was doing. I was the invisible help, the girl in the background, the logistics girl. I stuck to my corner and kept checking the rundown sheet, waiting for slot 7B. Time moved in uneven steps. The kids danced, sang, juggled, recited poems. Parents clapped. Cambria's voice echoed from the stage like she was hosting the Emmys. Then, finally, I heard the MC's voice shift slightly, almost hesitant. Due to a last-minute illness, our next performer had to cancel, but we do have a backup video submission. Please enjoy this special performance. The lights dimmed. The chatter quieted. And then it played. There I was, on the massive screen at center stage. Me, 10 years younger, hair shorter, cheeks rounder, posture straighter than I remembered, bow in hand, eyes closed. The first note filled the gym. It was clear. Clean. It sliced through the quiet like a silk ribbon unfurling. Not flashy, not overly dramatic, just precise. Felt. For the first 10 seconds, you could have heard a pin drop. Then came the murmurs. "That's her?" I heard a parent whisper. "I didn't know she played like that," said someone else. From my hidden corner, I saw Cambria's silhouette freeze. She turned to our mother. Mom leaned in, confused. Their expressions darkened as the camera zoomed in on my face. The guest judge, Mr. Raines, the Broadway guy, leaned forward, one hand near his mouth. He didn't speak. He just watched, closely. My solo ended with a pause, then a slight nod of my head. I remembered that part. I had bowed out gently, thinking no one really cared. But now, they did. Applause erupted before the lights even came back on. I stayed where I was, unmoving. People were clapping, sure, but they didn't know they were clapping for the woman standing 10 feet behind the stage curtain. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't crave their recognition. I just breathed. Later, someone replayed the footage on the school's Facebook livestream. And when Cambria noticed the comments rolling in, who was that violinist? She was amazing. Why wasn't she in the program? She made a face like she'd bitten into something sour. One of the student volunteers caught it on their phone, her rolled eyes, her mom's tight-lipped frown. And me? I kept my back straight and walked past them both on my way to help the next kid set up his prop table. No words, no glances. I didn't need to say anything, because the room had already heard me. The rest of the show blurred past me like fog on a moving highway. I stayed behind the scenes, half listening, nodding when someone handed me a headset or asked about a missing cue sheet. But my mind? It was looping. Not the music, but the silence that came after. That strange, clean quiet of people realizing they'd misjudged you. It should have been enough. It should have felt like something cracked open, finally letting the light in. And for a split second, just a heartbeat of a moment, it did. Someone in the crowd had whispered, "She was incredible," and I caught it like a secret floating through the air. Another woman nudged her husband and asked, "Do you know who she is?" He shrugged. "No clue, but she should have been the finale." I didn't smile, but my spine straightened a little, my steps steadier. I let myself feel proud, until I saw her, my mother. She was flanked by 2 PTA moms near the side hallway, Her lips pursed into that too sweet smile she used when she was about to tear someone down. I paused in the shadow of a folding chair rack and listened. "I don't know how that video got in," she said to the others, voice low but sharp. "We never approved anything like that. It was heavily edited anyway. Her reel playing never sounded that clean. Maybe she paid someone to fix the audio." One of the women gave a nervous chuckle, unsure whether to agree. I didn't move. My pulse pounded in my ears, but everything else inside me went still, like a dam holding back something ancient. She continued, louder now. "I mean, I know she's been fragile since high school. This kind of attention, it's probably overwhelming for her." Fragile. Edited. Overwhelming. As if what just happened on that screen hadn't been me, hadn't been mine. I turned away. Out in the main hallway, Cambria stood under one of the decorative arches made from streamers and dollar store lights. She was laughing, no surprise there, with a circle of old classmates, some of whom I recognized from our yearbook's most likely to buy page. "She probably begged them," Cambria was saying. "That's her thing. Sad eyes, poor me, and boom, sympathy spot. I mean, come on, she hasn't performed in what, a decade?" Laughter rolled around her like smoke. "She turned her whole life into some sob story," another girl said. "Props for guts, though, I couldn't do that." "She's always been good at playing helpless," Cambria added with a smirk. "Even got Mom buying into it half the time. It's exhausting." I walked right past them, not a glance, not a word, not even a breath held. But inside, my stomach curled tight, my hands ached from clenching, and something more dangerous than anger, was starting to take shape. After the cleanup, I lingered in the parking lot, just to breathe, just to think. A school board member, Miss Hillman, found me near the flagpole. She gave a soft smile, the kind you reserve for people you think deserve better, but you're not sure how to help. "You were remarkable tonight," she said. "You should have been on that stage years ago." I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to let that land, but before I could speak, footsteps approached behind us. "She's always had potential," my mother's voice chimed in, "but she hasn't exactly pursued it. We try not to pressure her, given her history. She's sensitive." The board member blinked. I could see her expression shift, trying to compute what was being said and why it made her uncomfortable. "She's been fragile for years," my mother added, soft and maternal. "We just want to support her without pushing too hard." Miss Hillman nodded slowly, made an excuse, and walked away. I stood there. I didn't argue. I didn't explode. I didn't cry. Instead, I got in my car and drove home with the radio off. Later that night, I sat on my bed with my laptop open and the house quiet. I watched the video again, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to remember it was real, that it happened, that I made it happen. I heard her voice again in my mind, fragile, sensitive, not asked, as if I'd been some uninvited guest at my own life. That's when I opened a new browser tab. My fingers didn't hesitate. I typed, "How to apply for independent scholarship grants for adult learners in the arts." I bookmarked too, wrote down the deadlines. And then I emailed the local arts council asking if they offered studio space for private practice. It wasn't a grand declaration. No fireworks, no revenge speech, just a quiet line drawn in the sand. Because if they wouldn't claim me, I'd find a world that did. And I already had a plan. I didn't sleep that night. But it wasn't the kind of insomnia that eats away at you. It was the kind that sharpens your thoughts. I sat up in bed, legs crossed, laptop open, the only light in the room coming from my screen, and the distant street lamp bleeding through the blinds. I'd replayed my solo 3 times, not for reassurance. No, that moment had passed. Now it was strategy. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, I propped my phone on a makeshift stand of books and lit a candle on the nightstand for warmth. Then I sat at the piano, pressed record, and started speaking. I didn't script it. I didn't perform. I just talked. "This isn't a sob story," I said. "It's a truth I've carried for years in silence." I played a few bars between lines, not to impress, but to fill the space like breath. I explained why no one ever saw me perform. How when my father died I was 11, and the attention in our house turned one-directional. How my mother believed in the image of success, not the slow work of nurturing it, and how I spent years being called fragile, overlooked, told to stay useful but quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for pity. I just told it like it was. Then I uploaded it onto a scholarship platform that allowed public submissions for peer review. I didn't overthink the title. I called it Unseen. The moment I clicked submit, I sat back and exhaled. And for once, I didn't feel like I needed someone else to validate it. 3 days passed. Life went on, at least outwardly. I taught my after-school art class, took roll, cleaned paintbrushes, rehearsed piano scales with a second-grade student who liked to hum louder than he played. I watered my grandmother's old orchids that somehow kept blooming even after she'd passed. But every time I opened my inbox, I found myself holding my breath. Then one afternoon, Wednesday, a little after 4 p.m., I saw it. Subject line, "We saw you." The sender was Margot Bellamy. I stared at the name for a full minute before I clicked. She introduced herself as the director of the Bellamy Collective, a foundation that funded creative grants for underserved, overlooked, and misclassified artists. She wrote, "Your video wasn't just brave, it was needed. We shared it with our review board. There was unanimous agreement. Your voice, both literal and emotional, deserves a stage." My hands shook. I read the email again and again. She invited me to a virtual meeting. I didn't tell anyone, not Cambria, not my mother, not even the few friends who might have offered cautious excitement. I didn't want diluted support or wary glances. I wanted this moment for myself. The call was scheduled for Thursday evening. I closed the door to my room early, fixed my hair the way I used to for auditions, and set my laptop on the dining table where the light hit just right. Margot appeared on screen. Gray blonde hair, tortoiseshell glasses, a presence like calm water with depth underneath. "You're not the only one," she said after our first few minutes. "But what you did, putting it out there, saying the quiet part out loud, that's rare." She explained her foundation's work, how they'd helped dozens of young women reclaim artistic careers derailed by family burdens, financial strain, or, she said this carefully, emotional minimization from people who should have been their biggest advocates. "You were never invisible," she said. "Someone made you feel that way. That ends now." I nodded, didn't speak, couldn't. Then came the second shock. Her organization wasn't just offering a grant. They wanted to sponsor me for a mentorship program that came with media training, travel funding for future performances, and, if I agreed, an interview about the video that had started it all. I felt like I'd been standing in the dark for years and someone had just opened a door. That night, I signed the acceptance documents digitally, sitting in my room with the window cracked open. The scent of jasmine from the backyard floated in. I smiled, not wide, not giddy, just that quiet kind of smile that feels like your chest exhaling for the first time in years. But of course, the door didn't stay closed for long. I was finishing up some final documents when I heard the soft knock on my door. My mother. She never knocked twice. "We need to talk," she said, already opening the door halfway. "There's a rumor going around. Someone said you submitted something using our name. Is that true?" I stood. No guilt, no hesitation. Just the kind of calm that only comes after letting go of old shame. "No," I said. "I used my name? For once?" She blinked, her mouth opening slightly. But before she could respond, I added, "And that's not something I need permission for anymore." Her eyes narrowed. "You're not the only one in this family with a reputation to protect." I didn't flinch. "That's exactly why I did it without you." I closed my laptop. The moment was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't asking to keep it. That Friday morning started like any other. I'd just poured coffee into the chipped ceramic mug with the faded "World's Okayest Teacher" lettering when the email notification blinked across my laptop screen. Subject, urgent, grant on hold. My stomach dropped before I even clicked. A sinking heaviness settled over me like damp wool. The body of the message was stiff, formal. "Dear Miss Hollinghurst, due to potential irregularities in submitted documentation regarding media permissions, the current grant disbursement has been paused pending review." There was an attachment. I opened it. A scanned copy of a media release form stared back at me, complete with my full name typed neatly at the top, and 2 signatures at the bottom, supposedly from my parents. I hadn't submitted this version, and I certainly hadn't forged their names. I sat back in my chair, breath shallow. My eyes scanned the page again, looking for anything, any clue this was a mistake, a misunderstanding. Then I spotted it. In the lower right corner, faint and almost missed unless you knew where to look, a watermark. The Wi-Fi network used to upload the file. It matched my family's home network, Hollinghurst Guest. I hadn't connected to that Wi-Fi since I'd moved out months ago. The date on the upload? Last week. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just sat very, very still. Then I stood up, grabbed my bag, and drove straight to the house I swore I'd never return to uninvited. It was mid-afternoon by the time I arrived. Cambria's SUV was gone, which was a relief, but the blinds in the living room were tilted open just enough for me to see movement inside. I didn't knock. The front door was unlocked, like always. My mother had once said, "We don't lock doors in this family, we trust." I stepped into the familiar scent of lavender floor cleaner and too much vanilla air freshener. My footsteps were light as I made my way down the hallway toward the home office. No one stopped me. The file cabinet hadn't changed. 3rd drawer from the bottom. It stuck a little, just like it used to. Inside were folders, each one labeled in her scratchy cursive. Cambria College, Taxes, 2017, HOA Dues, Thalassa, Missy. I pulled the last one. Inside, among a scatter of barely touched forms, was a sealed packet stamped with a school district logo and a gold youth advancement emblem on the corner. I opened it and read the top line, Hollinghurst Family Grant Application, Terms and Restrictions. The page detailed a small educational scholarship from 5 years ago, one I never received because my application was submitted too late, according to my mother. But that wasn't the real story. There, tucked in the second half of the packet, was a clause under the section labeled Family Image Preservation. Any public use of the family name Hollinghurst, including in media, must be pre-approved in writing by both parental guardians. Unauthorized use constitutes breach of representation clause and may result in forfeiture of opportunity or public retraction. It was dated, signed, filed, but never disclosed to me. My hands tightened around the paper. This wasn't protection. This was a leash. I left the house quietly, heart pounding not with fear, but focus. By 5:30 p.m., I was back in my apartment, the documents laid flat across my desk like evidence on a courtroom bench. I took photos, scanned everything, and compiled a digital folder with timestamps and Wi-Fi metadata. I even included the original video I had submitted, untainted, unaltered, undeniable. Then I sent an email to Margot Bellamy with the subject line, Clarification and Proof. She responded within the hour. "I believe you," she wrote. "Let's talk." The call was brisk, but not cold. Margot's tone held a tension I hadn't heard before, controlled but sharpened with purpose. "This isn't the first time we've seen this kind of sabotage," she said. "It's harder when it comes from family, but we handle facts here, not drama." I shared everything. The forged form, the Wi-Fi source, the scholarship clause buried in a packet meant to look like help. She listened. When I finished, she said, "We have attorneys. You just do your part. We'll do ours." That night, I filed my formal statement with the Foundation's Compliance Board. I attached the screenshots, metadata, and a signed declaration denying any submission of the release form in question. Before hitting send, I stared at my name on the screen, Thalassa E. Hollinghurst, and let the anger simmer just beneath my skin. They thought they could bury me in paper and fine print. They forgot I could read between the lines. It started with a single ping, then another and another. By the time I reached for my phone on the nightstand, the screen was glowing like a warning light. Over 100 missed notifications, dozens of message requests, group chat tags. People I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had something to say. I tapped the first message, a forwarded Facebook post from a local moms group. "The truth about our daughter, watch before you judge." The thumbnail was unmistakable. It was me, on stage, crying, looking away, my hands shaking as I held the mic, though I never said a word in that clip. I clicked. Whoever made it had spliced together moments from the talent show, moments that were real, but framed with a cruel narrative. Slow zooms on my teary eyes, muted audio, overlaid captions like, entitled, disrespectful, a girl who rejected her family for applause. The music playing underneath was eerie, almost theatrical. At the end, a single line filled the screen. Sometimes the people we raise turn into strangers. Posted from my mother's verified account. My throat tightened. The room spun. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. But it wasn't the stranger's comments that cut the deepest. It was the familiar names. My cousin Eleanor, writing under the post. This is so sad. I can't believe Thalassa would drag the family through the mud like this. Aunt Darlene, we all knew something was off. Guess we were right. Even my old Sunday school teacher left a sad face emoji and the words, such a shame. I prayed for her to grow into grace. And then there was the voicemail, from my godmother, her voice thick with hurt. Sweetheart, I'm heartbroken. I raised you better than this. If you needed help, you could have come to us, not the internet. I didn't leave the apartment that day, or the next. I unplugged the landline, turned my phone to silent. Curtains drawn, door bolted. By Sunday night, I was Googling rental listings in southern Illinois. Small towns, cash deposits, no questions asked. Some part of me, the part still scared, still that girl in the faded recital dress, wanted to run, to vanish, to let them win if it meant the noise would stop. But I didn't move. Not yet. Because on Monday morning, someone knocked. I almost didn't answer. I thought it might be my mother, or worse, Cambria, showing up to gloat. But when I peeked through the peephole, it wasn't either of them. It was Case, still in his worn denim jacket, still carrying that presence that filled a room before he ever spoke. I opened the door slowly. He didn't smile, just looked me dead in the eyes. I saw the video, the one they made, and I'm telling you right now, I don't care what they posted. I saw you that night. I meant what I said. I didn't say a word. You can either believe the people who've been trying to shut you up since you were a kid, or you can believe the audience that clapped for something real. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Don't let them shrink you back down. Then he handed me a flash drive. Your real performance, uncut. I had a feeling you might need it. When he left, I stood in the doorway for a long time, the cold air wrapping around my ankles. And that's when something shifted. That night, I set up my phone on a tripod. No filter, no dramatic lighting, just me, my violin beside me, and a glass of water off to the side. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I told the story, plainly. What happened, what had been done, what had been hidden. I even quoted what my mother used to say behind closed doors. You were never supposed to be born. You ruined everything. I looked directly into the camera and said, I was born into a family that called me a mistake, but I wasn't one, and now I'm reclaiming my name. I ended the video with a soft smile, not bitter, just done. I sent it to Margot, not to escalate, not to ask for anything, only to let her see me, all of me, unedited. Then I uploaded it to my public page, under my full name, Thalassa E. Hollinghurst. I didn't ask anyone to believe me. I didn't need to, because for the first time in my life, the truth stood tall enough to speak on its own. The morning of the HOA meeting, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of my slate gray blouse. Nothing flashy, no bright colors, just clean lines, a quiet presence. I didn't want attention. I wanted truth to walk in before me. The official letter had arrived 2 days earlier, crisp, coldly worded, a mandatory appearance regarding reputational concerns. I knew what it meant. The same neighborhood that used to ignore me had been stirred by the very people who once claimed me, and were now trying to erase me all over again. I arrived 15 minutes early. The meeting room was at the neighborhood clubhouse. Foldable chairs in uneven rows, a long table at the front. Fluorescent lights buzzed low overhead. The minute I walked in, eyes followed. Margot Bellamy sat near the front, casually flipping through a binder. Her lips were tight, but curved upward in a smile that never reached her eyes. Kaya leaned in beside her, whispering something, then chuckling as if the whole thing was beneath them. I didn't respond. I simply nodded to the chairperson and found a seat near the aisle. The room filled slowly. Mostly older neighbors I remembered from bike rides and 4th of July parades when I was 10. Some barely looked my way. A few offered small, awkward nods. When the HOA chair stood and tapped the microphone, the room hushed. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," he began. "We're here today because of a formal complaint about the distribution of a video containing defamatory content, originating from a private residence within our community." The words were professional, but the tension in the room was raw. He gestured to the screen behind him, and the lights dimmed. The infamous video, "The Truth About Our Daughter," played again. This time, not from a phone or Facebook page, but in full screen, projected for everyone to see. The silence was deafening. When it ended, the chair stepped forward again and clicked to the next slide, a screen showing metadata. "According to IP records and timestamps," he said, "this video was uploaded from an address owned by Miss Margot Bellamy." All heads turned. Margot shifted in her seat, then stood abruptly. "This is being blown way out of proportion," she said, voice high-pitched. "That video wasn't meant for the HOA. It was a family matter, a misunderstanding." The chair held up a hand. "We're not here for explanations. We're here for accountability. You used a neighborhood-affiliated digital platform, your board status, while targeting a resident. That violates our code of conduct." Margot blinked. Her mouth opened, then closed. I stood up slowly. "I wasn't going to speak today," I began, "but I've learned silence only protects the ones who write the narrative first." I stepped forward and handed the chair a manila folder. One by one, I laid out the items. First, the original uncut video from the talent show. No dramatic edits, no misleading captions, just truth. Second, the deed to the home, in my name, signed and notarized. Third, the inheritance trust documentation, including the clause that established my legal rights over the property and its representation. Finally, a cease and desist letter prepared and reviewed by legal counsel, addressed directly to Margot Bellamy and Kaya. "I didn't respond publicly when that video came out," I said. "I didn't retaliate with rumors. I simply protected myself. And now I'm asking this board to do the same." I sat down. My heart thudded against my ribcage, but my voice had stayed steady. The room remained silent for a beat. Then the chair leaned forward and cleared his throat. "The vote begins now. All those in favor of suspending Miss Bellamy's board privileges until further notice, raise your hands." More than half the room responded immediately. The rest followed after a beat of hesitation. Kaya tried to protest, but the chair cut her off. "You are hereby removed from any admin roles affiliated with the HOA's digital communication, effective immediately." Kaya flushed. Her cheeks burned red as she muttered, "She just wanted attention. This whole thing's ridiculous." From the back, a voice interrupted. Mrs. Green, an elderly neighbor with kind eyes who used to hand out peppermint sticks during the holidays. "I watched you grow up, Thalassa," she said. "We didn't know. We just didn't see it. I'm sorry." Something in my chest cracked, but it wasn't pain. It was release. After the meeting, people filtered out slowly. Some patted my shoulder. A few offered quiet apologies. Most just watched me go. I walked home alone. The sun had dipped low, painting the sidewalk in long, amber streaks. My heels tapped against the pavement. I didn't rush. When I reached the front porch, I paused. The house looked different now. Not like a battleground, but like something reclaimed. Mine. Inside, I brewed a pot of tea. I let the steam rise, fragrant and quiet. My phone buzzed. A message from my father. "You embarrassed your mother. Hope you're proud." I read it once. Then, without a word, I turned the screen off and slid the phone into a drawer. Some silences say more than answers ever could. 2 days after the HOA meeting, I took a different route home. One that curved past the edge of our old neighborhood and disappeared into the park where I used to rehearse. The air was cooler there, quieter. Somewhere in the distance, a child was laughing, maybe chasing a soccer ball or falling off a swing. I didn't look. I had one destination. There, beneath the old weeping willow, was the bench. Grandpa built it himself. I still remembered the sound of his hands sanding the wood, smoothing the corners, his voice humming quietly as I practiced nearby. "Every star needs stillness to shine," he used to say. I sat down slowly, letting the breeze thread through my fingers. The wood creaked beneath me, weathered but still strong. Like him, I reached underneath. The note he left was exactly where he'd promised, though not in words. Grandpa never told me directly, but when I was 12, he once tapped the underside of the bench and whispered, "If the world gets too loud, look where it's quiet." At the time, I thought he meant reflection. Turns out, he meant something more. Taped inside a waterproof container was a sealed envelope. Not yellowed, not frayed, protected. The handwriting across it, strong and deliberate. "For my little star. Open only when ready." My fingers shook slightly as I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, written in ink that curved like a song. His tone was calm, steady, the same way he spoke when he didn't want Mom to hear. "You've likely faced more than I ever imagined. And if you found this, that means you stood your ground. And I knew you would. I wanted you to have something they couldn't steal, edit, or shame you for. This trust is yours. It matures only when you've shown you could stand alone. And my girl, it looks like you have. Forgive them if you can, but never forget who you are." Tucked behind the letter was a notarized copy of the legal documents. He had opened a separate silent trust in my name, funded, protected, designed to unlock only if certain thresholds were met. Academic, legal, emotional, all now fulfilled. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it into my jacket, and just breathed. Not like someone who had won a battle, more like someone who finally laid down a burden that never should have been hers. A week later, I stood in the same auditorium where I had once been erased on a stage meant to elevate me. The crowd was already gathered, this time not for a competition, but a dedication. The MC, Case, took the mic. His smile hadn't changed, but there was something steadier in his presence now. He looked over the audience, then toward me. "Today, we honor not just talent," he said, "but truth and resilience, and the power of one voice, strong enough to rise even when others tried to silence it. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Thalassa Hollinghurst Youth Scholarship." The banner unfurled behind him. My name, in full, no edits, no shame. Kaya and Margot were not there. Their names weren't mentioned. Their presence wasn't missed. I walked slowly up the steps to the stage, pausing to look out at a sea of faces that had once looked through me. I cleared my throat. No papers, no script, just me. "They used to call me the poor girl," I said. And maybe I was poor, in approval, in comfort, in the kind of love that shows up without conditions. But I was rich in something else, integrity, resilience, and the quiet belief of a man who sat on a bench and taught me that worth isn't given, it's remembered. Applause rose like a wave, gentle, steady, full. In the front row, I spotted Mrs. Green again. She was dabbing her eyes. After the ceremony, I didn't linger. I thanked the organizers, smiled for a few photos, then slipped out the side door and into the fading sun. And there, leaning against the brick wall like he'd been waiting for hours, was my father. He looked tired, not old, just worn down in a way that made his suit look stiff and misplaced. He didn't speak, just stood there, hands in his pockets. I nodded once, not cold, not warm, just acknowledgement. He blinked like maybe he was about to say something, but I didn't stay long enough to hear it. I turned and walked past him, down the steps, through the parking lot, toward the future. My phone buzzed just as I reached the car, a message from someone I didn't know. "Saw your video. Powerful stuff. I run a mentorship program for emerging artists. Wondered if you'd consider consulting. You've got something rare." I stared at the message for a long moment, then I smiled. I didn't respond. Not yet. But I knew what I would say. On my terms. In my time. Sometimes what they call nothing is everything they were too small to understand. I never needed their applause. Just a bench, a letter, and my own name.